Well, hello, Riv community friends. Our topic for this content module is around the area of grief and lament. The book of Lamentations in the Bible, the actual title in the Hebrew is the word Aicha, and Aicha means how, but it's almost like a plaintive cry, like, how is this possible? It's when situations occur that are sort of just inexplicably terrible and tragic. And the language that's used in Lamentations, this is the fact that Jerusalem has been destroyed, how she sits alone, this city that once was crowded with people. She used to be great, and she's become like a widow. And the language of Lamentations speaks of weeping bitterly and tears on her cheeks, no one to offer comfort. All her friends have betrayed her. Harsh affliction and slavery. She's been overtaken. She's in a narrow place. Her gates are deserted. Her priests groan. Her young women grieve. She is bitter, etc., etc., etc. There are 5 chapters in the book of Lamentations that have language just on and on, recognizing and lamenting the pain, the tragedy of these circumstances. And then the most famous part of Lamentations is right in the middle of chapter 3, where it pauses. The author, Jeremiah, pauses and says, "And yet I call this to mind, and therefore I have hope." This is verse 21 of chapter 3. So 2.5 chapters in, he remembers, because of God's faithful love, we do not perish. His mercies never end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And this is the idea with lament. It's the recognition that there are really 2 competing realities that happen in these circumstances. One is just the sorrow and the anguish and the pain of whatever the loss that has occurred. It could be the death of a loved one, or it could be a significant financial loss, or a divorce, or you've become disabled. There's been an accident. There's been a tragedy. It's just sad, and you're angry and confused and frustrated, and just it's an inescapable weight of grief. And then at the same time, there is sort of this hope and this calling upon the character and goodness and sovereignty of God, the future joy that awaits, that kind of thinking, that kind of language. Lament is the process of sort of knitting those 2 realities together. I do think it's wise and important to sort of identify in any lamentable situation the nature of it. Is this something that's happened to you or to a loved one, or just broadly speaking, like, the earthquakes in Turkey feel like they're just lamentable, but it's not something personal for me, but for the people who are there, it's something that's happened. It depends on your proximity. And then what's the cause of it? So like an earthquake is just because of our broken world, or the shootings on MSU campus, that's because of a person's sin. It's not because of the victim's sin. They were just innocently in their classroom, that kind of thing. What's really going on? But whatever the case may be, something that is out of step with God's design, with God's character, with God's perfection, with his goodness has happened, and you will experience anger and disillusionment and just sadness, and there's just a weightiness to it. There's a gap between who God is and the many things that happen around us all the time. And there's lots of unhelpful ways that people try to navigate those things. There's people that try to numb it, with busyness or with alcohol or with some other substance. There's people who try to minimize or pretend like everything's okay or ignore it. There's people who over spiritualize it. There's people who, there's all kinds of different strategies. And really, um, biblically speaking, what we see over and over again is a turning to the Lord in prayer and a turning to the community to provide the necessary support, foundation, etc., that we need during these kind of seasons. We need to be aware of the realities that people are dealing with when they go through these kinds of losses, and be ready to show up and just listen and to be present as God is with us. And then when appropriate, to remind our friends, our family members of the truth of who God is. I think about Mary and Martha. One needed Jesus to say, hey, Lazarus will rise again. One needed just to be able to weep with Jesus, and he didn't say anything. And so there is a sensitivity and an asking the people, hey, how can I best serve you? But also a willingness to show up when people aren't able to articulate what their needs might be. And so we want this to be something that's present within our RIV communities. The longer we're together, and these, our RIV communities are now kind of half a year into their, life cycle, and we're getting to know each other better. And inevitably, there's going to be very lamentable situations that happen. And we just love for you to be equipped and prepared to be able to care for one another as we move forward. Even during our time today, one of the things we'll be doing is just pointing you towards a number of places in the scripture that can be helpful truths to remember yourselves or to be equipped to remind each other of. But just an attitude of empathy, caring, presence, Christ-like concern for others, remembering the lamentable circumstances that Christ himself has endured, and knowing that he is able to identify with and be with us in our own circumstances. That kind of thing is going to be just sort of the tone of kind of how we want to approach these situations.